What's cracking? All right, give me a second. Some technical difficulties today. I think we're almost set. All right, hope everyone's weekend went well. America, it is Sunday where you are. It's Monday morning here, 8 a.m. There's a lot to unpack today. I mean, who else is disappointed about the kid can't get a fight. Shakur Stevenson can't get a fight. So that fight's called off. I'm going to cover that in a video, not a live stream. So stay tuned today. I'll be doing that in like an hour or so. I want to talk about the title on the screen, about what happened yesterday at the UFC 293 here in Sydney, Australia. In the main event, there's some parallels with our favorite sport, boxing. And in that main event, if you're unaware of what happened or why it's relevant on this channel, is you had a 6-1 underdog, Sean Strickland, going against, in a lot of people's eyes, the greatest middleweight of all time, stylebender, Israel Adesanya. We could talk about the lead up. We could talk about all the beef and the shit talk that's been a couple years in the making between Strickland and Adesanya. We could talk about how Strickland shouldn't even have been in that fight. The South African Dricus du Plessis, he knocked out Robert Whittaker about a month ago and was given the title shot in Sydney. This is when he beat Whittaker, and Adesanya gets into the middle of the octagon. They have this moment, and then du Plessis rightfully had the opportunity to fight for the title yesterday. He chose not to, and then 4 weeks ago, it was announced that that opportunity would be given to Strickland, and everybody wrote Strickland off. And why I want to talk about this and why it's referred to, why it relates to what we're talking about in boxing, because I'm going to tie the circle up between what happened yesterday with Strickland and Adesanya and what happened with Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford. You're just going to have to wait and hear me out. And so, firstly, going into that fight, 6-1 underdog, nobody gave Strickland a shot. If you know anything about Strickland's career, he is a boxer, right? He is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but he's been on record saying that he doesn't do weight training, he doesn't hit the pads, he doesn't do the heavy bag. All he does is spar. And it's a pretty controversial statement in MMA, at least. Boxing, I mean, I could spar. I mean, I sparred Saturday. I did 15 rounds. I'll spar Thursday. I'll spar Friday. Now, sparring in boxing is a little bit different. It's kind of like Muay Thai. If you go to Thailand, Phuket, you go anywhere into the gyms, this is their style. The Thais, that's why they have hundreds and hundreds of pro fights, is that they are used to sparring, stand up, but they're not trying to kill each other during those practices. And in MMA, I hear it a lot. You have guys like Max Holloway who says he doesn't spar. He stopped sparring years ago. And when you hear things like this, and because Holloway's been such a great career, a lot of guys will then piggyback. It's sort of like a match and mirror sport. If the champion or somebody who's good in the sport is doing something, people will then follow. And then you have a guy like Strickland who says, screw that. All I do is spar. He was like, what better way to mimic a fight throughout my fight camp than to fight? And you could find this guy on YouTube sparring people, walk-ins off the street, sparring trolls. This dude's very controversial. But the reason why it's relevant with now is because when you get those sparring rounds in, you begin to master the space and distance and timing of a fight. Now, Israel Adesanya, who was the champion, who is probably one of the biggest superstars in the UFC, which he is known as one of the greatest strikers. He comes from a kickboxing background. He was a champion there. He was a champion in Glory Kickboxing, and he's a stand-up striker. He's not going to take you to the ground and choke you. He wants to beat you on their feet, and everybody's giving him all the props for being such a pretty striker, which he is, elbow spinning techniques, and he's big and long. When you watched that fight last night, you watched Sean Strickland, who controlled the front foot, his tempo and pace. You got to love a guy who weaponizes his cardio. And aesthetically, Strickland's style, you would be like, what is this kid doing? He's real high here, he's real high and just tapping. Nothing fancy. He's throwing straight shots, and he's utilizing a really tall guard and a modified Philly shell. So he's not going like a Floyd Mayweather here and countering. He's holding it here, and he's throwing that straight right, touch you with the jab. And the reason why it was so beautiful to see is because it's what I tell clients from the boxing perspective. The complexity in boxing, learning how to box, the complexity lies with the simplicity of a technique. You only have two hands, meaning that you can only throw so many punches, but if you've never boxed, try to box technically. It takes years and years of mastering space, timing, angles, momentum, so many little variables in boxing. Thus, they call it the sweet science. What you see in that fight, the UFC in championship fights and main event fights, they have 5-minute rounds, okay? So it went the distance. It went to the judge's scorecard. And Sean Strickland, I had Strickland win in 4 of the 5 rounds. I gave Israel the second round. Some people didn't. So Strickland won, a deservingly so, unanimous victory, and new middleweight champion with this boxing style, this boxing heavy. Now, you wouldn't put him in a boxing ring and expect him to be successful. It's only a good style in MMA. He would get picked apart against a boxer because there's no head movement. It's just different. MMA, you have to worry about the takedown. You can't be too heavy on your front leg because somebody could kick it. You can't be too heavy on your base because you have to sprawl. So I'm not saying that Strickland blew the boxing world away with his performance against Izzy. I'm saying for MMA and UFC, his boxing showcased, and it's very rare when you look at UFC champions to have a boxing background. I think that's exciting. And the tie-in with Errol Spence Jr. is this. And this is a conversation that nobody talks about. And I think in order to understand this, you have to know what it's like to get hit. Okay, and here's my point. Read all the articles right now of the fight yesterday. All the articles giving Israel Adesanya reasons why he lost are so similar and parallel with the articles when Errol Spence lost against Crawford. What'd they say about Errol? He looked slow. He looked drawn out. He looked weight drained. What are they saying about Adesanya? He looked slow. He looked drawn out. He looked weight drained. Now, what's the common denominator in both guys? Here it is. Early on in the fight, they got caught with a clean shot and got rocked. In the rest of the fight, they looked different. And this is my point. Why is it so hard for us to understand that it could take just one shot to change the trajectory of a fight? It could take one shot to erase that 8-week fight camp, to erase a fighter like Adesanya's storied career, his record. One shot could change all that, and for some reason, nobody talks about it. At the very end of the first round, Sean Strickland caught Adesanya with a gorgeous timed 1-2. And the reason why it caught Adesanya off guard is because Strickland doesn't load up on any of his punches. He doesn't throw anything looping. He's here, and just straight down the pipe. Here, here, here. It's very basic, but very disciplined. And Adesanya wasn't expecting that space and distance because he's used to fighting guys who are afraid of Adesanya's countering. What Strickland did was he smothered Adesanya, put him back on his back foot the whole fight, back against the cage, and fought him at his space and then also his tempo. Is he not himself anymore as well? I mean, it's the kid. I mean, think about how many kickboxing fights Izzy's had in his career, and he's in his mid-30s now. I agree with you. I mean, we age and we deteriorate, and age gets the best of us. But from a technical and tactical point, nobody picked. I mean, just because the odds were so high, I put money on Strickland. You know, I'm a bit of a riverboat gambler, but nobody could have guessed though that it was going to be Strickland's pressure that would make Izzy uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? Because usually you never see Izzy uncomfortable. He gets hit with that 1-2 at the end of the first round, and I counted them. Go to the replay, guys. 27 unanswered shots. 27. Now, in MMA, there's no standing 8 count. So we have to remember that as well. It's not like boxing, you could get clipped and then you could take a knee. Boxing, you could take a knee if you get hit with a shot. You could take a standing 8. Ref gets in between. Go to your corner, neutral, and then we'll count it out. MMA, no. You have to weather a storm. Now, he weathered the storm. It was the end of the first round. He gets back to his feet. 27 unanswered shots. He goes back into his corner in between one round and 2, and you could see he was changed. He wasn't changed because he knows that oh, damn, I got caught with a shot. He was changed because he had brain trauma. If you've ever gotten hit with it was as clean as a punch. we've seen Izzy lose before. We saw him lose against Pereira. He's lost in kickboxing before. He lost against Jan Blachowski when he went up to light heavyweight and dared to be great in the UFC, Polish power. But we've never seen him get hit as clean. That 1-2 was so, it rocked his head back, snapped. Lucky he didn't go out. And it was that. So he had to fight. As soon as that happens, just like when EJ got hit in the back of the head, you're not the same. He won't be this. Who knows if he'll ever be the same guy. But the last time I got really hit hard in sparring, I was circling to my left. It was the end of a round. I'm sparring an old guy who's using me as like a litmus test. He's trying to knock me the fuck out. I'm just trying to get rounds in. I drop my guard, and he throws a fucking right hook haymaker and drops me. Don't go to the ground. It's when the lights, it's like somebody turned the light on and off, and your knees buckle, boom, and you flash right back up. It's a flash knockdown. I finished the round. I didn't really tell him how affected I was. We did the last 2 rounds, but it made me depressed for a week. Why you bring up EJ? Don't play with me, bro. I love EJ. I love EJ because I'm bringing up Errol Spence because the fans need to understand that sometimes one shot could remove, because maybe I don't like the idea that the whole game plan or the whole strategy of Errol Spence was a bad fight camp, which it could have been, or a bad weight cut, which it could have been, but it could also be sometimes you get tagged once early in a fight and the brain isn't strong enough to come back from in that short amount of time. So my point was, why be fucking with EJ? Why be messing with? Nah, man, I like EJ too. But back to my story. So I get hit with that shot, flash knockdown. I was depressed for a week. And it's hard to explain. Not depressed in a way that I was second guessing my path or my journey, or I was, thinking about harming myself. It's the shot to my brain. It was a sadness that it's hard to explain, that's related to, I think, the brain trauma. I felt disappointed I wasn't good enough to defend that. I felt sort of like sad. And I bet you if I would have got a brain scan, I definitely had a concussion. Another man showed you human. Yeah, exactly. So humbling. And could you imagine, though, if that was for... these things happen in these 2 examples with EJ and Izzy. These things happen in front of the world with belts on the line. And so that's always a factor. Guys, there's so much to talk about, but I'm going to save it for another live stream today. We got to cover Teofimo Lopez getting a belt. We got to cover Shakur Stevenson, which I'm heartbroken that fight's not going on with Frank Martin. We got to cover a fight coming up in a couple days. Richardson Hitchens is fighting. And then just stay tuned. Hit like, hit subscribe, hit share. All that stuff helps me get boosted in the algorithm. I'm loving the lives, and I'm loving the interaction with you guys on this level. I feel that my podcasting background, Frank versus Keyshawn, did they sign that? Did they sign for... I was gone all day yesterday. I didn't know if they signed Frank versus Keyshawn, hey, I'm down with that. But we'll see. Stay tuned to this. I appreciate the feedback. I probably got 2 more lives today. I'm going to be doing 2 more videos. All right, guys, I appreciate you. Spade the ace card, my man.